I'm now recording. I'm going to cut all this out anyways. You'll know when we start. Any final things you all need to do? Anybody need to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, get a drink of something?
Give me a second. I need to pour a gin.
There you go.
One sec.
There it is. See?
There you go.
Maybe I should grab some whiskey.
I think I did that one time. I just drank a beer throughout the entire podcast. Yeah, this whole TI thing has everybody scrambling. I know I was talking with Jill, and we're having a hard time getting everything.
Yeah.
I've run out of tonic water. That's the hardest time a man could have.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Guess you just better drink that much more gin to compensate.
Yep. That's how that works.
Yeah.
Okay, Gucci, let's roll.
Gucci. We're Gucci boys. I've started that saying that so much my girlfriend says it without thinking.
That is one I've managed to avoid.
The Gucci? Okay.
Yeah.
There's one girl said to me, "Ah, Lamar," the other day. I walked away from her.
See, I know this story's fake because it involves Knoxville and a girl.
Oh, shit.
Ouch. The burns.
Man, we haven't started yet. Hold on, guys.
Okay. The order we're going to go through right now is going to be Secret, Fnatic, IG, Cloud9, eHome, Navi, MVP, Hot 6, and Complexity. In that order. Don't ask me why I put Fnatic so high up. It was the order I thought of these teams in before I looked them up.
No EG?
No, we did EG last time.
Okay. I wasn't there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. Yeah, we've already talked about EG and PPD and all of them, Sumail. We had a good discussion about Sumail, actually. So it's gonna be interesting. Yeah. Anything final requests here?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Liquid Dota podcast number 6. This is our TI preview part 2. I am actually joined by an all-star cast today. Coming back again for part 2 is Ben Knoxville Steinhausen. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It's Knoxville. He's doing stats for TI and a whole bunch of other people. He also writes for 1337 magazine from time to time. Really smart guy. Glad to have him back. You doing good, Knoxville?
Yeah, pretty good. A little bit tired, but it is T-minus 3 days till TI5.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Yeah, time of recording, it is 3 days. Joining us, he was on Liquid Dota podcast number 1. He is what's your official title, Tefis?
The head of the Dota 2 Wikipedia, I guess.
He's the head of the Dota 2 Wikipedia, according to him. Yeah, it's Tefis. He's back. And our very special guest is a caster for Beyond the Summit and will be attending TI. It's LD. How you doing, LD?
Wow, very special, man. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yes.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. You and Knoxville really are the big names that join us on this.
Ooh, ouch.
Oh,
man. The burns are already.
I know.
I got one skill in my life. I got one skill in this life. So let's get right into it. 14 teams qualified. 4 teams are going to have to fight in the play-ins. The schedule has been announced. It will be a double elim play-in, which I'm really excited about. Anybody else got thoughts on the double elim for play-ins? Tefis?
It looks just like the TI3 format almost. I think it's identical. And yeah, I think everyone agrees that the TI4 format had some flaws. So I think it's a good thing they're going back to what worked.
Yeah.
I mean, the play-in series had to be double elim because there were 4 teams going in, 2 teams going out. It would have been silly if it was like two single elim.
They're like Swiss format or something.
Yeah, that could
that would
definitely
suck.
work.
I think double lim is perfect when you've got 2 spots. You need to find the top 2. Double lim is the best format for that, and it's BO3. It's they have 1 day set aside for the wild card anyway. Yeah, and you really want to have it on its own day so that those teams have a chance to prepare. Also, so the other teams know who else is going to be in their groups. For both the teams trying to qualify as well as the teams already in the event, it's important that it's not on the same day. So since you already have one day, it's really not a big deal to just run a straight double in bracket. So I think GSO groups is the right way to go here. And if you don't qualify, there's really no excuses. You've got 2 shots. They're all best of 3 matches. The best team should win.
Yeah, I agree. So jumping into the teams, in our TI preview part 1, we went over a lot of other teams. We're going to finish the rest here now. And we're going to start with really the favorites. Secret won the last 4 lands they've attended. LD, you think they can keep it going?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like there's 2 main ways to look at Secret right now. One is that they're alliance at TI3, and if you look at them that way, then sure, why not? They went into TI3 with a gigantic bullseye on their head and on their back, pretty much in every part of their bodies. Everyone knew Alliance was the team to beat at TI3, and in the end, nobody could really stop them. The only team that I think that even took a game off them was DK. Had that one ridiculous Burning anti-mage game. They still lost the series anyway, but it took like the game of Burning's career just to get 1 win off Alliance at TI3, and so that's the one way to look at it, is like they're the unstoppable juggernaut. They're going to go the distance. They certainly have the track record to suggest they could, and an even more accomplished and star-studded roster, I think, in some ways, at least in terms of Dota 2 accomplishments than what Alliance had. But the other way to look at them is that they're the DK of this TI. They come into the event with a gigantic target on their back. Everyone's going to be gunning for them. The nature of the format is fairly forgiving for the top teams, I would say. Secret's very likely to finish in the upper half. They're likely to start in the winner's bracket. But at the same time, other teams are going to be able to game plan for them, and that's where you have to wonder: will they have those pocket strats? Will they have like the just drafts that can't be stopped? I mean, for me, I think very instructive is looking at DAC, especially where Secret went undefeated in the group stage and did not win the event, and in fact got kind of blasted away. Didn't even make it to the grand finals after an undefeated stretch in the group stage. So to me, that does raise some questions. When teams have their eyes on Secret from the start of an event, can they really go the distance? Looking at the events they've won recently, they've won the Red Bull event, and I think the Red Bull event, basically they just beat IG in a best-of-5 grand finals. So,
and it was close. It was pretty close.
It was a good series. It's only one best-of-5. There wasn't really stiff competition at the tournament. Outside of that, the best next team was at the time Team Malaysia, now Team Fnatic. To me, that doesn't really say a whole lot. I think they also winning the summit. That's probably it was probably the hardest event in terms of just the format, where it was double elimination, so you have to play more games. Teams can keep their eyes on you a bit longer. As apparently my phone is telling me the world's about to end. Yeah, we have a flash flood warning here in California.
Really?
I don't know how that works in Los Angeles. We don't even get rain usually, man, but apparently we got a flash flood now.
It's exciting.
But yeah, so I think looking at the summit, double limb, that's where teams had a lot of data on them. They played a lot of games. They still end up winning the tournament, and they did so pretty convincingly. The last event, I think that does speak well towards their ability to go the distance. And then I think the last one you look at is ESL. They had a great performance there, but it's also the closest event to TI. It's a single elimination event, and ultimately they only have to win 3 matches there. So I feel like out of those, DAC, the format's the most similar, and that does worry me a little bit. So if I had to say, can they go the distance? Yes. Do I think they will? I don't know. Favorites tend not to go all the way at TI in my experience. They tend to go far, but not necessarily the distance. So I think it's very much an open discussion. If you have to pick one team, though, I don't know who else you pick besides Secret.
All right.
Yeah.
Tempest Knoxville, any follow-up thoughts to that?
Yeah, I'll roll off a bit what LD was saying.
Okay.
With I can compare him a bit. He had the comparisons between Alliance and a DK. I'd say Team Secret right now is looking a lot closer to what Alliance were doing before TI3. While they didn't dominate the entire year or anything like that, they're rolling in with a bunch of wins. DK didn't quite dominate all year. They had their few wins here and there, but they were also shown to be pretty shaky occasionally as well. And the current lineup of Secret, I think, is just killing everyone. Other than their debut at DAC and then their stumble against Alliance, I guess. Yeah, I just think that the analogy holds up a lot better against Alliance, even though it's not quite the same scope or whatever that Alliance had. I don't think we'll ever see a team dominate like that again. I think those days
I mean,
are
the thing
over.
for Alliance was they dominated for like a year and a half or something. Like maybe not quite that long, but close to a year. Like from well before TI3, they won TI3. They still did well after the event, and then there was like a 3 to 6 month stretch heading into TI4 where they started to fall off. So I would agree. I think the other thing, like the counterpoint to DAC, is also it was their first big event as a team.
Yeah.
They didn't play any official matches before that event. They also, it was a different patch as well. They seem really comfortable in this patch, especially, and they've been tinkering. We've seen them change drafters. We've seen them change their in-game caller, or at least supposedly it's a bit of a mixed bag. Who's been in charge of which aspects of the game plan? And of course, everyone has their input. This is a team of very accomplished players. You don't have like a Sumail type player who's just getting on the big stage for the first time. They've all been there, done that at TI before. So I would agree. If I had to pick one of the two, I think Knoxville's right. It's probably closer to Alliance, but I mean, I've been to enough TIs now where you really never know. Like I would not, for example, I would not encourage anyone to bet the farm on Team Secret, no matter how strong you think they look going into the event, because the nature of all competition in TI is shit happens, man. Someone gets sick, someone gets out drafted. Maybe you have a leak like the last TI where, you have the media going in. That was one thing that happened to DK, which a lot of people forget, is they actually had, I think it was GameFi. GameFi basically released a video which revealed a crap load of information about this team. Now, maybe the Western-speaking teams didn't see it because it was in Chinese, but I'd be surprised if none of the Chinese teams did, and ultimately they had to play some of those along the way. So it's tough. But yeah, Secret definitely go in his favorites. I think there's really no argument about that after their past 3 or 4 major tournament wins.
All right. Yeah, I mean, he pretty much said it all. The only other thing maybe is, Puppy versus S4, and kind of they've been running back and forth. Both are TI winning captains, and then dealing with the raw talent of Arteezy, Zai, and Kuroki. All these guys it's just such a good team on paper, and they've shown that they can play well together.
I had an interest in, just on a bit of a side note here. I know absolutely. I've been hot mic, but I'll try to keep it down later. But I had an interesting interaction with Puppy at Starladder. I think it was season 9. So the event was over. Everyone's hanging out, drinking, relaxing, unwinding. I forget who won the event, but it was neither Alliance nor Na'Vi. And this was back when S4 was on Alliance. And I remember at one point Puppy started talking about S4. And the interesting thing to me was he said, there's only one player who moves the camera the way that I do. It's easier to demonstrate if you actually see what I'm doing. But basically, what Puppy was doing was he'd have his hand in one place, that's where your camera is. Then he'd quickly move it over somewhere else, then right back to where he was. Move it somewhere else, then right back to where he was. So he's constantly jumping the camera around. And he said the only player that did it as consistently as he did was S4. And he said because of that, it really sounded like he had a ton of respect for the guy. And this was going back to right after TI3, which of course I guess he should, given they lost to them. But maybe it seems like maybe Puppy's happy, to slightly cede a little bit of leadership. Now that's not to say you won't be involved in any key decisions. Everybody's going to make calls on a team like this, but I mean, as far as done it, he's done it against Puppy. He's done it on the biggest stage, and it seems like everyone who's played with the guy, be it Bulldog, be it Loda, be it some of his current teammates, even players who aren't on the team with him who wanted to team with him. I've yet to ever hear a pro player say, "Oh, I don't want to team with S4," or there are better options. This guy is universally respected in the Dota community. So I think it seems like they're doing the best with him, and you don't want to mess with a winning formula going into the TI. But yeah, I just found the mutual respect between the two really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. So moving on. A team.
Hey, wait. What? Hey, don't I get a chance? Fine.
Knoxville, what do you have to say about Secret?
I think Secret are I would definitely put my house on Secret if the odds were good enough. And some of the odds that have been
the odds are going to be
around,
shit, aren't they? The odds are going to be shit. Nobody's going to you're not going to have above 1-to-1 odds on Secret. They're always going to be worse.
No, they were above 1-to-1. They were 40% to win, so it was 1.5 to 1.
Okay,
that's probably worth.
Those are great odds.
That's probably worth.
No.
Anyway, going into TI 4, DK had an ELO rating of 1631. At the moment, Secret's peak was 1627, and Alliance going into TI 3 was 1625. So Alliance, I mean, Secret definitely better than Alliance, but only just. And just behind DK, they're very, very similar. But I guess what the most important thing is, like, who can beat Secrets? Out of the top teams, who can really take, like, a best of 3 or best of 5 series of them? Who would you, like, anyone? EG, maybe?
Yeah, maybe EG.
EG's had a few shots to try and haven't really been able to.
Yeah, I mean, look at recent results here. What EG lost 3-1 at ESL 1. They lost 3-1 at the Summit 3. They haven't played, and I guess they played with their old roster at the Summit 2 and beat EG 3-0 there, but that was a third place decider, so I don't really count that. The last time that they lost a big match, they got 2-0'd by EG at DAC, I think, as far as like a crucial match. But I guess a lot of people just want to discard DAC because it was their first event as a team, you know, all the reasons we mentioned before. So I don't know, I think there's a lot of teams that definitely can beat them. I disagree, like they're unstoppable juggernauts right now. And the reason is we haven't seen what the TI5 meta is. We don't know what the hero picks are going to be. Maybe a lot of things Secret has been doing going to the event will get countered. You know, people, all these top captains are going to be game planning against them. If you pick one team, let's say you're Vici, EG, IG, LGD, Cloud9, Empire, like any of these other teams that look like they can make a decent run at TI, if you can only pick one team to game plan for, it's going to be Secret, right? I mean, that's just a given.
Yeah.
So, again, this is where having the target on your back comes into play, and there's a lot of smart captains across all those teams. I feel like I don't think they're going to go undefeated in the group stage. I'd love to be proven wrong, and they probably will, given that they did at TAC, but it's just a very low percentage thing in general, I would say. So.
Yeah, maybe we'll see a techies counter, right?
Yeah. So then,
Yeah, the meta's just going to shift too quickly for them to keep it up.
yeah. So then that kind of brings in another point on that. You can't really, like, it would take something special to outdraft Secret. So how do you beat them? Do you just straight up outplay them? Do you know, what do you think it's going to take for a team to beat Secret?
I think a combination of everything: good drafting, good individual play, good team decision making, good overall strategic approach to the game. I don't think you can just obviously you can't just say, oh, we're just going to outscale Secret. Like, they're not that good. You know, we're just going to last hit better than them and ward better than them, and they're not going to have a shot. Like, that's not going to happen. So you can't just outscale them, right? So it has to come from the other aspects of the game: the draft, the overall strategy, and team decision making. I think there's a lot of teams that have what it takes, though. I honestly feel like there's at least, I don't know, 6 to 8 teams at TI that have a good shot against Secret in a best of 3. I wouldn't favor any of them, probably, at least not going into the event, but I wouldn't say like, oh, there's no way. There's a snowball's chance in hell they'll beat Secret. Vici Gaming, EG, I wouldn't.
Empire?
I'm not that high on IG, but I guess you have to put them on the list just based on the names on their team. LGD, Cloud9, Empire, VP. To me, these are all teams that can win a best of 3 against Secret. Will they? I don't know, but they definitely have the potential. And I think if you got Secret alone, you gave them True Serum, they have to be honest with you. They will be the first ones to admit they are not invincible. And if they go into the event thinking that, then they're likely to get surprised.
All right. So, moving on to our next team. A team that some people kind of questioned when they got their invite. I personally think it was the right invite, but good team was Team Malaysia. Now Team Fnatic getting picked up by that organization. They really are a superstar SEA team. I mean, just looking at this roster of KYXY, Mushi, Ohio, Kisik Imba, and Johnny, hoping I pronounced Imba's name properly. That's a really good team.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a really talented team in terms of individual play. The funny thing with this team is like the classic Mushi thing happened, where Mushi, for those who don't know, probably I guess along with Ice Ice Ice, the most famous 2 players from Southeast Asia. He's got a long history of changing his roles and stepping away from teams and rejoining them. I'd almost call him the Bulba of Southeast Asia. I mean, his teams, I guess Mushi's teams have lasted a bit longer on average. Sorry, Bulba. But he tends to clan hop a lot, to use the old Counter-Strike term. He tends to switch teams a lot, rosters. He's always the guy that everyone wants to play with. But the funny thing with this team was to start off with Kachik Imba in the core role, and it was actually Mushi playing support. But that didn't work out. I think Mushi just, I don't know, at this point in his career, man, it just seems like he has to be a core. Like, whenever he's a support, it's not that he plays poorly. He's had his moments, but he's just spent too daggone long playing a core role. A lot of the players who have played multiple roles, it feels like they've switched between them more often throughout their careers, but they seem to have found their stride with that. With Mushi playing mid now again, and I hope they stick with it. That's the one thing that worries me about Fnatic is if things don't go well, you just never know with Mushi, man. Like one day he might just say, "I'm gonna play support now. You're going mid," and they haven't practiced it, and who knows what happens. It's always a question mark with him.
One thing about Fnatic is that like you were saying, they've got Mushi was playing core, then went support, now back to core. All of their players are very versatile. Like they're the only team that's got more than 55 unique heroes in every single one of their players. That's
Wow,
that's like a really
Wow.
really high number. And what's funnier is that Johnny, who I think is their least spoken about player, has played 83 different heroes in professional games, which is like
Wow.
maybe top 10. That is like of the TI contenders. That's like a really really high number.
But how successful is he with those 88 different heroes? Because my guess is with a lot of them, it hasn't gone so well.
Yeah, I mean, it's also hard to compare across regions. Like winning in Southeast Asia compared to North America, probably more significant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly now. I mean, maybe you go back
Yeah.
a year or two and it's different.
Yeah.
Tempest,
Yeah.
you got anything?
So people sometimes call this like a newer team, but I think really you can go back and trace this team at least to Orange, right? And there's Titan in between, and everyone's gonna compare it to Orange's, and Orange is a Cinderella run, right? Where it's a third they got,
Yeah.
but I think that was still just that. It was a bit of a Cinderella run. Mushi did something amazing. I don't know what, but he managed, and I really think that's just a Cinderella one. It's a similar team. I think they're gonna look like they did last year. They aren't the powerhouse that people might have got the impression they were at TI 2013.
I just feel like we don't have a whole lot of data on this team, I
Yeah.
guess, is the issue for me. Like, I'm looking at the recent results on Liquipedia. Shout out to Liquipedia.
Yes,
It's
yes.
awesome. Their two most recent results. 2-0 loss to Secret. I mean, who hasn't lost 2-0 to Secret lately? I don't really put that as a huge knock against them. And a 2-0 win against London Conspiracy, and they finished third place in the MLG Pro League Season 2. That's it as far as Fnatic's record. Now, if you look at Team Malaysia, which I guess their recent results are in a separate category, but I could say pretty confidently, like this team hasn't really played that many big events. That was where a lot of the controversy came in over the TI invite. It's not to say that the players aren't individually talented or that they wouldn't be able to qualify or that they're not good enough to play a TI, but there's just very little track record. At I-League Season 3, 0-2 loss to LGD Gaming. Still, they finished third at I-League. I don't think it was the strongest season of I-League, though. They finished below, let's see here, Vici Gaming, LGD, and they finished above Newbie and Alliance. So they did beat Alliance 2-1. I think that was before Alliance had their latest roster as well. But I just feel like there's not that much data on this team. I just don't know. Like, You look at RNG Sports going into TI3, nobody had them pegged for top 3. And, I mean, frankly, if they don't deny the Aegis and then tilt after that, they're probably top 2 at that event. But nobody even had them in the top 3. I'd be surprised if many people had them in the top 5. So they're capable of making a run, but, again, it's not something you're gonna count on, really.
Yeah.
It's also a lot harder given the format of TI5.
Well,
Like,
TI3 had a
you don't-
very similar format to TI5.
Yeah, but you don't get rewarded as much in the group stage for winning, like drawing series 2-2, like 1-1 in the best.
Oh,
of two.
that's right. They had the 2 points for draws. I mean, did they draw a ton of games at TI3? I don't actually remember.
I kind of remember them drawing a lot, but that might be wrong. Let me have a look.
I'm gonna check real quick here. They went 8-6. That probably does mean quite a few draws. But the thing was, they got knocked down to the lower bracket in the first round, and then they had to make a run. They got knocked down by Navi off the bat. Then they battled all the way back to face Navi again, and then lost them 2-1. So
Yeah, but because of like their position, okay, so they only had to beat Dignitas 1-0, which they did, and then like it was still best of 1 against Fnatic. Their first real challenge was DK, I think.
yeah, but then they beat Tong Fu, which was basically Newbie that won TI the next year. Like that's a gigantic win.
That was after Navi just pudge hooked them to death. Like I think Tongfu were like emotionally distraught at that point in time. It's like hard to judge how impactful that
It was
losing in the
one
way they
match
did.
after that. They had to beat IG first, and they beat them 2-1. So I don't know. I think at that point you kind of shake it off. If it was the next match, I would agree.
Okay.
So yeah,
It's
I don't
been a
know. I
while.
mean, this team is capable of making a run. Despite all the shit that KYXY gets, like if you go back and watch some of the highlights from TI3, that guy was so clutch every match besides that one, and I've seen him be clutch in games since then. So I think I would actually say this is a team that has a lot of clutch players. Mushi is known for throwing some very high-profile games against some of the top Chinese teams through item purchases, saving too much gold. There was a infamous game from TI where he had like 4 BKBs. This was back when you could buy a new one and get a 10-second charge. But I think overall these players have been clutch more often than they're not. So I see them as capable of making a run, but it's a bit of a long shot is basically how they evaluate for me right now.
If you look at TI4 as well, just with Titan, which had 3 of 5 of the same players, they, those top 7 or 8 Malaysians always seem to form some sort of team. Going into that, they were
heartbreaker for them.
Yeah, going in, they were dominating Southeast Asia. But it's all these small cups. There were, especially then, no big events in the area. They weren't traveling much or anything like that. But even though they were dominating C, the best they could do was, 9th, 10th at TI4.
Well, they were a little bit unlucky there, though, right? Because
Yeah.
Titan came in as 8th seed into the bubble race.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and they were matched up against Newbie, who were the 9th seed. And yeah, like, that's really unlucky. A team that's been having like internal conflicts and not having such a great early part of the tournament, but very, very skilled, turns on the gas and all of a sudden you get knocked out.
Well, you can always say that looking back. Maybe if they played better in the group stages, they would have been higher, right?
Yeah, I think it's true from both angles. That they also played Newbie really close in that match. The game 2, which they ended up winning, was like a super epic game. They had a ton of clutch fights around the Roche pit. The other 2 games, they got beaten pretty quickly, 37 minutes, 18 minutes. I can't exactly remember those games, but I feel like especially that game 3, it just felt like they were completely figured out by Newbie. This was when like early lane pressure and pushy was very strong, and they went for the Prophet, the Luna, the Dragonite. I imagine just took a lot of towers down quickly. So I don't know. I just think with Fnatic, you just don't know what you're going to get. To me, they're one of the bigger enigmas in the event, both in terms of recent performance. They have 2 newer players. We're talking about how clutch they can be, but they don't have Net and Extinct. They have Kachikemba and Johnny, who have never played a TI before, as far as I'm aware. I don't see any appearances on their histories. I'm not recalling any that come to mind.
Ketchikimba trained with the team with Orange, but he didn't play
He was
at
the
TI.
backup player, if I recall.
Yeah.
He was the 6th man at the time.
Yeah.
So they're going in with 2 raw players. Now, they have some veteran leadership that may not kill them. Last year, EG went in with some rawer players and still did really well. And Vici Gaming the year before it, I think it was with FY Infinity. But still, could be a cause for concern.
So, final thoughts. Where do they finish?
Bottom 8.
Anyone?
I'm going to say right in the middle.
Automate's kind of. I feel like you need to be more specific. Like,
Okay,
Right at the
okay.
top of-
Are they top 4?
9 to 10.
Yeah,
9 to 10.
9 to 10?
Yeah.
All right, 9 to 10. LD.
I'm a bit of a fanboy. I'm going to say 7th to 8th, but I don't think they go much further than that.
Okay. So, moving on now, we move on to a giant in the Chinese scene. If you know one Chinese team, this is a good bet. It's one of these. Invictus Gaming, 1 TI2, 3 members of that squad are back, being the current squad being Burning, Ferrari 430, Luo, Chuan, and Faith. The 3 from that TI2 squad was Ferrari 430, Chuan, and Faith. I mean, I feel like they've gotten stronger adding Burning, but they just haven't seemed to mesh and get the teamwork down yet. Anybody got thoughts on IG, kind of how they've been doing recently?
I mean, I view them as a gigantic disappointment, honestly. Like, look at the players on this team. You've got 4 players that have won 3 players that have won an international, 5 players that have gone pretty far at TI in the past. You've got Burning as your carry. This was the dream. You have 430 and Burning on the same team. So now, like, IG after TI4 was literally 430 carrying the team. Sometimes even 1v5 it felt like. Luo would create space for him a little bit, but the team was just underperforming in general. They've managed to put Chuan and Faith back together. They have amazing core players. Luo's in what, to me, is a more comfortable role for him, which is the off lane rather than playing that one position. I felt like he was very hit or miss as the one position player. Sometimes he'd have excellent games, sometimes he wouldn't deliver. Burning's a lot more consistent, even if not always spectacular, but they're not playing like a top 3, top 5 world team right now, at least not to me, and I think they should be based on the strength of their players. So yeah, it does raise questions. Are there internal issues? Historically, from word on the street and just what I've heard is that Chuan can be a tough guy to team with at times. I don't know this personally, but he's a very animated guy. He's a very intense player. Can be difficult. I remember, I think it was at TI4. There was a game where he was playing Treant Protector, and the game didn't look good. Granted, like his team probably wins that game 1 out of 20 times, but he bought a Midas in a game on Tree where I was like, this is not the game to get a Midas. And he just did it anyway. It was basically like, you know what, fuck it, guys. This game's over. It seemed like kind of a tilty thing to do to me, and I feel like we've seen those games from Tron before. This team at their best, to me, is top 3 material, but theoretically. But yeah. I don't know if we're going to get it. Their track record is pretty abysmal going into TI, given the players. 5th, 6th at the Summit 3, 5th, 6th at iLeague Season 3, 5th to 8th at Mars TV. Their best showing was the ESL 1 Frankfurt tournament where they finished 3rd, 4th, but to get there, it's not like you've got to win a ton of games. It's, again, single limb. The last time they had a really good showing was Starlighter Season 12, and that was in April. So, I don't know, man. This team, to me, is one of the biggest disappointments going into TI. But the good news for them is they've got a lot of time to figure it out, given the format and just the amount of time they've had to prepare before the event.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that said, they're drafting. So I'm not sure if this is still true, but Faith has historically been a drafter, and he seems really, really comfortable towards the end of a patch or the end of a meta, and then he feels like a freshman going into the new patch. He always seems to draft really, really weirdly, completely differently to how the other top teams are drafting, and it generally doesn't work out for him, but. TI, as we know, is going to be a tournament where its own meta develops. It's going to be a lot of creativity required in adjusting to that meta, a lot of experience required, which he certainly does have. But, it's going to boil down to whether or not he's able to adjust quickly enough to a new meta, or whether they're going to lead the new meta as it evolves.
Yeah, I'm with LD on these. The team is just a disappointment the past year. All the players and the brand itself have, as of about a year ago, like if you look at them from a year ago, they were all amazing players and all dominating the scene for the past year and a half in China, and it's a hard thing to do, dominate China. But it's the same players, and the past year they've just haven't clicked. Their results just haven't been there. It's just confusing. It's hard to come up with an answer of why suddenly they can't put out these performances. They brought in June and Chizbug a little bit, but then kicked them pretty quick because they still, of course, weren't winning anything.
I mean, part of it is maybe not even that these guys are a disappointment, although I started the conversation that way. Maybe other teams are just getting better and IG's not keeping up. They are an older bunch, right? There's not many teams who have as many veteran players. In fact, in terms of like number of years playing at a top level, they might be the oldest team at TI. Maybe not actually like chronologically oldest, but like competitive Dota-wise oldest. I mean, who's older than this team? EG's got some young players. Cloud9's got some younger players. You've got LGD. LGD's got some new blood as well. Like, this is one of the only teams at TI that looks like they have the name brand of a top team, who doesn't really have any new blood. I don't know if that's I guess Luo is the closest thing, but I mean, this guy's been around for
one as well.
You say that the Luo has played like 460 games for IG already.
The Chinese Dota has played a lot of games this year. Like they racked them up.
that might be true. TI3. But Ferrari's played 754 games for them. Faith and Chuan 599. I mean, the comparison is probably Na'Vi, who you have like Dendi and Havorst, who've played over 900 games already for them. Chinese Dota historically used to play like a lot less, but this year it's like close to even. Like, do you think that this experience playing together is actually going to kick in this tournament? Do you think that's going to be a factor? Because you're talking about all the new teams that have got new blood. They seem to be adjusting pretty well, but like experience is king is something that a lot of people have said.
I don't know. It feels to me like that magic formula is having some like young blood and some veterans. If you look at a lot of professional sports, generally the most successful teams are not the teams that have like 5 guys who've got like 20 all-star and all-star matches between them, but are all walking around with canes or constantly injured. Like and of course in Dota you don't really have to worry about injuries that often. There's a few players like Fear that have had hand or wrist injuries. Yeah, but in general, players don't get injured in Dota. So in that sense, being old's less of a factor. But I don't know. If I had to say, I think IG is going to be decent at TI. I think they'll finish probably like top 6 or at the worst top 8. I don't see them totally bombing out and pulling like a newbie at DAC and finishing, bottom 2 or even last place. I don't think they'll do that poorly, but I do feel like anything less than top 3 for this team is a big disappointment given their roster.
Yeah,
I think they're going to be a top 6, 7 or 8 wouldn't be unreasonable depending on the draw.
Like, I guess that's the sweet spot, right? Because that's where all the money is top 6.
Yeah. But I mean, remember when Burning was like doing it, Burning needs to win a TI before he retires. Zhao 8 wanted to win before he retires. Lanham wanted to win before he retires. Like,
they can't all win before they retire, though.
They should just make a superstar team. Like, old boys got retired.
Like Big God?
Oh, yeah, Big God. Didn't seem serious to me. It seemed more a publicity stunt than anything.
I still enjoyed watching him.
The other thing was that Xiao 8 really stepped up his game going into DIC. Like, his individual play was really high. I forget who it was. He was just dominating like pretty much everyone he played mid, which historically Xiao 8's not known for being a dominant mid player. He's known for being a great captain, basically. Like, he'll do his job mid, maybe gets out-farmed a little bit, but then he just is in the right place at the right time for team fights. Later on, he's more of a general impact, and obviously he's the in-game leader for pretty much every team he's ever played for. But I don't know. DAC, the other thing was DAC came like right around when I said it in an interview. It was just a bad time for the Chinese scene in general. Like, everyone's
just after Chinese
getting ready for Chinese New Year. All the rosters would have changed, but since DAC got announced, they didn't yet. So I think you largely have to discount Big God. As much fun as they were to watch, like, if that team's playing at TI, they certainly don't beat the top 6 to 8, and I don't even know if they get into the top 10.
Coming from a bit of a different direction, this is one of the teams I think is probably pretty much done after this TI. Even if they do really, really well, they win. Burning's probably going to retire. I could see some of the other guys retiring. If they lose, this team's not going to stay together.
I don't know. I think with the majors,
everyone says that every year, but every year there's more money. Now the majors are coming, so there's more reliable income year round. And dude, these guys just fiend the game. When they retire, retirement means you play 15 hours of pubs, but you don't have matches instead of 15 hours of pubs and matches. So I don't know. You're right. They're probably the most likely to retire. I don't know. It's just funny to me because every year we all say it, and I've said it as well. Like, oh, they're gonna retire this year. Like, he's all burnt out. And then what do you know? They're all back. Lanham's back. Burning's back. I mean, is there anyone who's Xiao 8's back? Is anyone actually retired from Dota 2?
I think all the teams are gonna stay. Like, all the teams that come top 6 are gonna mostly stay the same until the first majors, just because they want to see how the majors work, how much money is on offer, what the format. They're inquisitive as well, and they don't want to change before they know exactly what they're getting into. Like, they want to see what's going to happen 3 months after the international ends. Maybe there's going to be another paycheck waiting for them.
Yeah. All right. So, any final thoughts about IG?
Huge expectations based on their roster. Not a great track record going into TI, but they do have a great track record historically as a team, as a core group of players. I think top 6 to 8 is pretty realistic if they pull it together and kind of gel. To me, this is a team that threatens top 3, but they're one out of, like, there's a lot of teams you can say that about. I feel like with them, they look a lot worse than the other teams are kind of in that discussion right now going in. So I'd rather put my money on, say like a Team EG or even a Vici Gaming or LGD, Empire, VP. Like these teams to me look a lot hotter going into TI, but that can quickly change after the group stage. So I would not rule them out just yet, but I wouldn't really put a whole lot of faith in them until they show us something at the event.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So moving on. Next team we're going to discuss is Cloud9. A team consisting of Eternal Envy, Fada, Bone7, Big Daddy, and Misery. I mean, obvious question is obvious. Is EE-sama going to buy a TP scroll this tournament?
Oh man, that's a low blow.
I got nothing else. I mean, coming from TI4 and last year, they have switched their roster around a lot. Obviously, Piladai, Aoi, and Sing Sing all switching out. The only two players that are the same from last year's team are Eternal Envy and Bone7. Do we think this team will prove better? And their results kind of all over the place. I mean, in premieres, they've been okay. A lot of second, third, fifth, and sixth. The last thing they won was NVIDIA Game 24 back of September of last year. So
I think the big, for a lot of events, not winning is a poor performance, but this is TI. And this year especially, top six is great as far as the money goes. Now these players as competitors won't be satisfied with it, but I think the big thing for me with Cloud9 is they very rarely get blown out. Like even when they lose, if you look at this list of results going back to 2014 and deciding matches, there's only a handful of times where they've just gotten swept. And one of them's Dota Pit right before TI. It's an online tournament. The players weren't taking it all that seriously, judging by their tweets and just what you'd expect with TI forthcoming. Certainly nobody's going to be showing big strategies or top secret picks. They're a tough out, and I think they're very likely to have a solid performance. Like as much with IG, I put Cloud9 in comparison to IG since we just talked about them and say Cloud9 is much less likely to totally bomb out of the event than IG or than say a Fnatic. Just based on historical data, this team always does at least decently. Once in a while they have a really shitty tournament, but generally speaking, they have a solid showing. And if they get to top six, then they're going to be pretty happy with that.
I think they're very comparable to IG. They've both got a similar type of mean, but IG is just high variance. Like IG could win TI, but they could come 12th, and we'd be like, okay, cool, whatever. C9, I think they've got like a 50% chance of coming top 6, and like a 30% chance of coming 7th or 8th. Like I think that's kind of where the break
almost no chance they finish bottom 8. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So what are some things you think that they need to either work on, or what are some things they need to improve to take them from that, where they are now, to get them to that next level where they could finish top 4 at TI consistently, and we believe it.
That's a tough.
I think
question.
on an emotional level, they are battling quite a bit. Like I don't know if you've been watching Twitter, but a lot of the time, NB puts out tweets about how what is friendship, and it seems like, I guess he's trying to bait people to be rude towards him, but he did delete everyone on his friends list except for Bone7. I don't think he outwardly enjoys losing games, and I think he also views himself as the person who tries to make the least mistakes, always tryharding. Everyone knows him as a tryhard, and he's going to try his hardest to win. And if they lose a couple of games, even in the group stage, they are a team that can slowly kind of move away from each other and slowly start trying to do their own thing, like how you described Chiron did against LGD. Envy is the kind of guy that can do his own thing and just go off and meander. And yeah, I think that's the only thing that can make them lose or come bottom 8 or do terribly at TI. If Quantum Pope keeps it all under control, I think they're fine. think they they're on their path. They're gonna do it.
I don't know. For me personally, a lot of that stuff's overblown. I feel like unless like you're in the room and you actually see what's going on, you can't take these guys seriously on Twitter, man. Like you can't take anything Envy says seriously on Twitter. Like if he writes a blog, that's one thing. And sure, sometimes he has tweets that he really means what he's saying, but Twitter is like diarrhea for your fingers, right? You can just say whatever you want in half a second. And Envy is certainly guilty of just impulsively kind of saying whatever comes to mind. And even if you hang out with the guy in person, he's not a stupid guy. He's a very smart guy, but he will just blurt out almost anything that comes into his head, good or bad. So, sure, maybe he's not the best at like keeping team morale high. He fought with Fada at ESL. That was a pretty public conflict over decision making in their elimination match. He didn't even flame Misery, but the community decided he flamed Misery when he said they have four next level players and Misery wasn't on the list. But that's not even he didn't mean it in a bad way, right? That again was not flaming Misery. He was just saying like the other four players on this team are always trying to think of like that crazy shit that no one's ever thought of. Meanwhile, Misery is just quietly going about his business playing really solid, amazing Dota. Yeah. And that is good enough to win TI in its own right. But, of course, the community wants drama. So, now Envy saying one of our players isn't really as good as the rest. I don't know. I tend to find all that stuff overblown. I do agree that this team can tilt, though. Like, I think that's something they have shown in matches. I don't think Envy would tilt the way that Chuan does, though. Like, that Chuan game, to me, is an example of somebody, like, literally quitting on their team in the middle of a game. To me, that's very different from getting a little frustrated or desperate and maybe even choking under pressure, making bad decisions. Like sure, Cloud9 has done that before. I have never seen any of their players like basically give up on the team in the middle of a game, and I feel like I saw that from Chuan at previous TIs. So in that sense I disagree, but I do agree in general like morale and emotional issues could be more of a concern for this team. I don't know. Envy doesn't seem to be that confident, calm captain the way that like an S4 or PPD seems to be, at least outwardly, but we're not there in the war room, so who are we to really say, I guess.
Yeah.
I think they lost a lot when they lost Aoi, because Aoi seems like the kind of guy that Envy can confide in, and the two of them, very creative combination. A lot of the strategies, a lot of the styles that they developed were born out of the two of them working in tandem, but without Aoi, I think Cloud9 has become more one-dimensional, but they've also got a lot better at doing that one dimension. Like they're the type of team that's going to go in and they got their strat. They're going to be aligned to tier 3. Everyone knows what they're going to do. Everyone like expects it, but they're really, really, really good at executing on that strategy.
Yeah.
I wonder what that strategy will be at this TI, actually. That's an interesting question, because you really don't know. I mean, there was a point for this team where I felt like every game it was Zeus or Phoenix. I forget when it was. Maybe it was right before the summit. And it was at Starladder Season 12. And they were basically winning every game where they got those heroes. But as soon as people started banning them, and that wasn't the only issue, but it was certainly felt like it was a part of it, their fallback strategies just didn't seem as strong. So
Fata's stats on Zeus
they have looked a little more one-dimensional. But if there's ever a tournament where teams are going to have more than one strat, it's TI, right? I feel like that's the event where every team will have pocket strats. Even if you don't see them, they probably have them and just feel like this isn't the game for it. This is a team that has been pioneers historically. Like go back to MLG Columbus, where we saw all kinds of crazy shit from speed gaming, and even the most recent TI, where you had the Meepo Bounty Hunter strat. I remember a game where Highlight Dot got like, 6-7 courier snipes or something?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's like 4 or 5. But they are capable of that next level shit. And if they can find the right next level shit, they can go really far at TI. But, will they? We're just going to have to wait and see.
They do have 4 next level players.
Yeah. What did you think about this series, for example, against EG, where at the summit, where they, day one, crushed EG. EG's having a pretty bad day one of its tournaments. And then day 2, EG bounced back and took their revenge. Do you think that there's anything to be gained from analyzing a series like that going into TI? Or do you think that was whatever, one sample?
Well, I can tell you what Cloud9 would have said. Well, specifically what Envy would have said. We spoke to a lot of players before the event to get their feedback on the format. Envy was one of the more vocal players. And a lot of his ideas he ultimately agreed with the format that we wanted to use, which was the 2 groups feeding into one. feeding into one bracket. The idea behind that format is basically this way you don't know who you're playing later on in the bracket because whether you finish first or second affects who your opponent's going to be from the other group. So it leaves like the final matches a little more open ended. But the downside, and they didn't really think about it, was there's one weaker team in the group. So unless we win both of our best of threes, even if we beat EG in the first round, we're going to have to play them again. And so I think they would argue that had they known they were going to have to play EG again, they wouldn't have shown some of the strategies they did. And in TI, you might have to play another team again, but it's not going to be the same way. Like, the first win will matter more than that first win mattered at the Summit because of the format. So, I don't know. I think they need to be very smart about when they show strategies. To me, they're a team that relies a little bit more on, like, that clutch you pick or outdraft or just ambushing. I'm trying to remember what they did against EG in the first series, but it was something we hadn't really seen from them before, and it caught EG off guard. So to me, that's maybe the takeaway there is they don't want to waste any sort of pocket strats or unusual picks until it's a really important match.
Yeah. Looking at it, it was actually there was a lot of DK and Coddle in their first series.
Was that it? Okay, let's see. EG Cloud9 2-0. Oh, yeah. DK Coddle.
Yeah, DK Coddle.
They threw the Broodmother in there. They actually won a game with the Bone 7 Leech Commander. That never happens. I feel like it never happens. They have won.
And they still won the second game of that, the second best of three, where they had like Big Daddy, Night Stalker, and
they actually went 3-2 against EG but got knocked out because of the format. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I think the takeaway for me is this team can beat anyone, including one of the strongest teams in the world at the time, EG. But others might see it as, they get figured out and then they show weakness. So I guess it depends on your perspective.
And that's where coming up with the multiple pocket strategies comes into play.
We'll see, man. I mean, fighting is not really conducive to coming up with strategies, but they're boot camping right now, right? Like they're all playing together every day. They're in the same building. We're seeing social media go out. I haven't seen them fighting when they're streaming. Like, I don't know. I don't want to read too much into that personally.
Yeah, it's all Twitter. It's all fake. Can't trust what you read on the
They're
internet.
all competitive. It's like they want to win. I think all of them want to win more badly than they want to fight or be right about whatever they're fighting about. To me, that's, in the end, push comes to shove. They're going to do the best they can to win the game. They're not going to give up on their team in the middle of the tournament. Maybe after the event, they say, oh, fuck that guy. I'm not playing with him anymore. But during the event, they're going to bring their game.
All right.
I think they're the one team that no matter how they do, they're going to have severe roster changes, though, going forward after tier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's just a lot of personality conflicts on the team. That does seem apparent. There's always roster shuffles anyway for most top teams, and if anyone's not gonna change roster, it's probably not Cloud9. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's very likely we see how many? Probably at least 2 players changing on that team.
2 or 3.
Yeah,
I think like it'll be Envy, Bone 7 plus 3. Hashtag predict.
I would agree. They seem to be the 2 that get along the best. Bone 7 understands Sama.
He gets noticed. So moving on. eHome coming into TI1 for those of you who watched the Dota 2 documentary. They were the favorites. Now, a little bit lesser known team, unless you really follow old school Dota. A lot of really good names on this team, though. Their active roster being Yang, CTY, ROTK, Lanham, and DDC, with ROTK being the captain and drafter. I mean, LD and I kind of mentioned this in our notes together, but CTY is really, really good. And I've heard things said that he is, in fact, the best mid in China.
Really? Who said that out of curiosity?
Who was that? Oh, it was...
I think it was Gods who said that.
Yeah. And who?
Okay,
who
so
told you that?
I was wondering if it was a player or something who said that.
There was it was in one of the earlier podcasts. I forget. It was somebody who actually knew people in that scene.
Okay.
Who said that like secretly they say he's the best.
He played so freaking well in the TI qualifiers. So a little background. My first time casting CTY was the original Vici Gaming, and this was when he played the 1 position for the team. there was a game that Winter and I cast together, and I think we're going back to 2013 here, where CTY was playing Anti-Mage in the safe lane. He went Midas, Battle Fury, Treads, Vlads, and then he went for a super early Roche. I think he might have even smoked to get into the pit because he was on the Radiant side. He got Roche, and this was all like ridiculously fast. I forget what the timing should have been in that patch, but probably everything before 20 minutes, like had the Yasha even, out of control Anti-Mage. And they end up losing the game. And it was an experience. It was his first big match. He started swapping items in and out. He got rid of the Battle Fury, and they needed the wave clear to push the waves quickly. He sold an Abyssal, I think bought an Abyssal, maybe even a Butterfly got purchased and sold at some point. Like, you could tell he was in over his head. And he later ended up quitting Dota. FY turned out to be the real star from that team, and even ended up beating CTY in 1v1 mid, and I think it was the Red Bull ECL 1v1 challenge also, heading into TI that year. And all of a sudden, everyone's talking about FY after his good showing on VG Gaming, and certainly he's a world-class player. But CTY left Dota. He disappeared. I think he went to League for a while. There was an interview with him. I forget the details, but it seemed like he was done. And he comes back. He's playing for EHUM. He's got some veterans on his team, and he's had some time and experience. And the big thing for me is, like, CTY always won mid. And he always seemed to win his lane. Even in the match versus FY in the 1v1 challenge, he was beating FY in lane, but where he lost was in the war of attrition, because it just seemed like he got impatient, and FY just kind of outlasted him. This was 1v1 Shadow Fiend mid. You always build, like, mech, magic wand, just this disgusting, like, turtle build, slowly push out the waves, try to hit their tower a couple times, back off. Like, there's really no hero killing after the early levels. And C2 actually got first blood in the match, ended up losing it because he just got a little too cocky and overplayed his hand. But this C2I feels a lot different. He's much more patient. He still wins his lane, but he, at least in the qualifiers, he wasn't overextending. Like, in fact, he was the most stable player on the team in the qualifiers, I would say. Now, I don't know the actual stats on it, but it just felt that way to me as a caster. And if he plays like that at TI, I think this team can make a really solid run. To me, actually, the big question mark on the team is not CTY, it's ROTK, who had, just from my perspective, casting the games, again, don't know the stats on it, and absolutely abysmal qualifiers, especially in some of the bigger matches. They still ended up winning, and sure, RTK brings more to the team than just his individual play, but I feel like he's got to step it up. And to me, CTY has been the real star so far.
Yeah, CTY like hardly ever dies. He's got like a really, really low average deaths per game. 3.2 is like, on patches, that's like comparable to Fear and Aoi.
Wow.
Howie's never involved in fights, so that's a good standard to go for.
So I think Yang here is flying a bit under the radar. People might know him a bit better as ZYF. When his first splash on the scene was with LV Gaming when they took NES tournament and against LGD. But then they also took D2L, and this LV Gaming wasn't a star roster or anything. They have DDC, Lin, Demons, the guys who continue to bounce around some of these lower teams. But ZYF, I remember watching some of those games, and he was carrying the team. Like, it was
Mushi
incredible.
part of that team?
No, he was not.
He was not.
No, that was... Who was that? That wasn't...
There was there was someone
That was
in
EHOM.
LV.
That was eHome China, wasn't it?
The initial LV did go to eHome initially, or three of the players did. Yeah. Him, Inflame, and
that's what it was.
DDC.
Inflame.
It was ZYF, Inflame, DDC, Lin, and Demons.
Yeah. I just remember ZYF just being a monster on LV Gaming. Like,
he had some of the best stats in the previous patch as well. Like, out of the tier 2 team, or like, yeah, kind of tier 2 teams, he was a demon. And in China, being a tier 2 team is like one of the hardest things, because the underperforming tier 1 teams try prey on you, and the tier 2, 2.5, 3 teams try, like, you're the gatekeeper to tier 1. So they're always like constantly pestering you. It's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah, I just think this guy could make a big splash. This is his first big shot on a big team at a big tournament, I think. And I think he could make a pretty big splash.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think for me, the main difference between ZYF and CTY is ZYF's been consistently very good, and I haven't ever seen a game where I'm like, God, this guy's a horrible liability for his team. There are some CTY games that I've cast in the past and just watched where he was like the reason the team lost the game. Like, if you had to just blame one guy, let's lynch him, CTY's your guy. I've never really felt that way about ZYF, so I guess because he hasn't necessarily had as much of a jump, he does fly under the radar a bit. But yeah, I think both of these have, and this is an example to me of a team that has that interesting mix of explosive young talent, great veteran players, Lanham and DDC. Lanham, of course, known for his insane playmaking ability, probably one of the biggest playmaking supports in the history of Dota, period. Hell, even in other roles. I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was the old Rattlesnake, where he played 3 different roles in the qualifier match against Godblack's team, was it? Quantic, I think? God, I forget whatever team Godblack was on, where they fell short at the qualifiers. He played, in one series, he played a support jungling Enchantress, a carry Storm mid, and an off-lane Clockwork, and they qualified. Like, who has ever done that? I don't know if that's got to be some kind of record in Dota 2.
That's the first time we've seen it in the history of Dota.
Okay. We've got a statsman here, Knoxville, the TI statsman himself confirming it, so
it's confirmed.
It must be true.
Yeah.
But yeah, DDC has quietly stepped up his game as well. I felt like he was more impressive in the TI qualifiers than he was heading into it. Still, I talk about him a lot. He draws a lot of attention to himself by his nature. Very loud guy, awesome personality, one of the most fun people I've ever met in the Dota scene, and especially from the Chinese scene. He doesn't speak that much English. I think he understands a decent amount, but he's still just a very personable guy in general. Of course, I don't speak any Chinese. But ROTK, to me, still the big question mark. What are the stats, Knoxville? I mean, he looked pretty terrible in the qualifiers in the games that I watched. Like, just overextending, playing too greedy, getting picked off a lot. I don't know. Maybe statistically I'm wrong.
I don't have the qualifier only stats, but I know that on the patch he's died 5.7 times a game, which is like double that of a traditional safe lane carry. How about other
off-laners?
Bone 7 is 5.2, and Bone 7 I think dies quite a lot comparatively. So, Ike's Mike would be the gold standard here. Let me look up Ike's Mike. That will be the definite.
I was looking for the positive gold. Oh, you just want to go the negative that way. Okay, here we go.
Hey, I'm going to be positive for like 2 weeks. I've got to be negative. Get that out my system now. So there's any
flame now, forever hold your peace.
So
fill the time though. Who here would feel robbed if eHome didn't play C9 and we didn't see a ROTK versus Big Daddy match?
Are they going to be mic'd up? I mean, that's the thing is like that's 90% of the fun of that match is having them mic'd up. But
even if they're mic'd up, they're not going to agree to have.
No, it's not going to happen. I'm a little jealous of CS:GO. I'm not going to lie. There's been a very recent movement in the CS:GO scene from some of the top players that they don't like the always mic'd up, always on air. Like everyone can hear our strats before each match, but. God, it is fun to listen to, and I would love to see a Dota tournament do it. Who knows? Maybe a fun event can do it, but a lot of the fun isn't just the shit talk. It's like really getting to see how these players approach the game, and Big Daddy's a great example. I had the pleasure of watching Secret play at the Summit too. We needed an admin. Someone had to get food, and so I adminned one of their games, and these players are very different. Most players are very different when they're actually playing in a match than what you see on their stream. Like probably the best example would be Sing Sing, who I've heard is extremely serious when he's playing matches, but you turn on his stream, it's like, oh, this guy's a clown. He's just a jokester. You can't take him seriously in competitive Dota, but they flip that switch sometimes. I would love to just, if nothing else, just hear the roar from Big Daddy and RTK, the shouting contest, as it were.
Man. So kind of wish they still had the boost set up from TI1 where they're facing each other and you can bang on the glass and everything.
Oh, that would be great.
So much fun.
Yeah, so RTK has died the most of any offlaner on this patch. Like, not only TI5 teams, but all teams.
Wow.
He's 7th overall, 7th highest deaths per game, and everyone above him is just supports. Mainly CIS supports. It's a lower down Nico, always want to fly solo, and then Kabu and friends.
And I want to say the thing with RTK that concerns me is, aside from the stat doesn't sound good, but like maybe he's creating a ton of space for his team. Just watching a lot of the games in the qualifiers, he's dying without really getting much accomplished.
He's getting caught out, and he's like not doing anything with it.
Yeah, he's not slowing down the enemy supports. He's not like denying their farm. He's not controlling the runes better than other offlaners. He's just getting caught, like you said. And if they can cut down on that, I think this team is a really decent shot to finish in that like 6 to 10 range and maybe overperform expectations. They were a qualifier team, right? They didn't get invited. I could see them doing as well or better than Fnatic, but if RTK plays like he did in the qualifiers, then it's going to be an uphill slog.
I think 7 to 9 is kind of the sweet spot for them. Like, if they're doing really well, 7 or 8th. If they're doing not so well, 9th, like 8th or 9th.
Yeah, I think like even 8 to 10 might be more realistic. But again, it all depends on just how well the team gels. So I wouldn't rule them out for like 6 to 8, but that's probably the upper end of what you can realistically expect from the team.
Does this team?
I think the format's actually going to hurt them quite a bit because they're the type of team that probably won't be able to win against some of the tier 1 Chinese teams, but maybe could take a game off them, and that's about it. Like, they're the type of team that...
And you need 2 O's in this format. You really need 2 O's.
They're never going to get... I don't think they're going to get more than, like, 2 or 3 2-O's.
It depends. So much depends on the groups. When are we going to get the groups?
I know.
I guess Valve said they're not releasing them until everyone arrives in Seattle. I don't know if they plan on making, like, a streaming event out of it. Maybe they just don't want teams to have too much time to game plan against each other.
That's and
I know the wild card teams come into play. Are they not going to decide? I guess maybe they don't decide the groups until you know who's qualified from the wild card. But
no, they'll make that known, I think. Although there is a huge advantage if you're not a wild card team because almost everyone you're going to be playing against straight away. 6 teams that you're going to be playing against, and I mean, kind of, but the other teams have had to. I mean, some teams have been directly invited because they've done well at other tournaments. For a team like eHome, which has always been a like tier 1.5 team, to kind of say, well, you're not only you're a team tier 1.5, borderline tier 1, but on top of that, we're going to make it harder for you by letting every other team prepare against you while you can't prepare against them. That seems a bit harsh.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it does sound pretty bad. I don't really see a solution, though, unless you just let nobody prepare at all until right before their matches. But I think you get worse Dota overall then. So
yeah, I think that they're going to kind of, at the players' dinner or something, at like the night before the tournament starts, they're going to say, here we go, here's the teams.
Yeah.
And here's the groups.
Some of the teams are really going to be like I guarantee you players like PPD and Eternal Envy are not going to be happy if they don't know their opponents until the day before the matches begin. I mean, they'll deal with it. They'll do the best they can, but they will not be happy about it.
If they get it on like 23rd, 24th, then they'll have like 2 days notice.
Yeah.
I still don't think...
I'm sure they would
also,
like more, but yeah.
Given how the schedule works, there's only 3 games on at a time, so only 6 of the 16 teams are playing at a time. That means that you're probably only going to be playing, 3 games a day? Or 3 matches a day, sorry.
Oh, 3 best of 2s a day, yeah.
Yeah, so you only have to be prepared for, 3 other opponents a day. So 2 days notice seems okay for me.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out, but it's definitely something to keep in mind with anyone who's coming through the wild card is even if you think they're capable of top 3 or something crazy like that, they have a massive disadvantage just because of the nature of the format, and they can only focus on the wild card until they qualify. You can't worry about the main event. You got to get there.
Otherwise, you have to worry about all the teams, not just half the teams.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to we just did the Chinese qualified team. Now let's do the Korean, or the SCA qualified team. MVP Hot 6, the Korean team. I mean, both Korean teams topped the qualifiers for SCA. Obviously, MVP Hot 6 winning and MVP Phoenix being in the play-ins. The Hot 6 team consists of Forev, MP, Sunbie. Anybody know how to pronounce that?
Sunbie.
Jerax, and Heen, with Heen being their in-game captain. I mean, the obvious question is, how long until we see the Korean dominance that we see in League and StarCraft? I mean, is it coming to Dota, or are we too far into the game for them to catch
Dominance
up?
is a strong word.
It is. Yeah, it is. But until we see them get to that level.
I'm going to say right now, we will never see Korean dominance in Dota on the level of League or StarCraft. Like, we may see a Korean team that finishes top 3 at TI, and I don't think it'll be this year, maybe in future years. we're never going to see like the top we're never going to see Korea on the level of like China. The game just doesn't have the penetration and it does as compared to other titles. Like there's just not that many people who play it. In fact, it's impressive they even have any teams at TI, let alone two, with the shot to get two into the main event. Hardly anyone plays it from everything I've read. I know Shobra didn't ask me anything on Reddit recently, and he basically said like Dota is not doing well in Korea. Blitz said the same thing. Purge said it. I don't. There's just not enough people playing. You need like a certain size of player base to dominate a game the way you could in those games. But could we have a strong Korean team? Certainly. I don't think this is the year though. To me, both MVP teams, even if they get into the main event, in the case of Phoenix, they're not. To me, they're very likely to finish bottom four. I think it's extremely unlikely they finish above that.
All right.
I think that they've got more chance of. I think that they are favored to do better than Complexity, who made it in directly. Well, through the qualifiers first place.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. I mean, look at the Summits America. It's a lot of teams didn't even get into TI, and Complexity's not even. We're seeing the finals played out right now, and Complexity's not here. It's Summer's Rift and Root. So I wouldn't disagree with you there. But I think even if you're better than Complexity, that doesn't mean you're not going to finish bottom four at TI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think CDEC is maybe a wild card team though. That when we've spoken about this, but that could break out that mold and pull a Liquid, come out from the wild cards and come in the middle of the pack type of thing.
I would agree. I think out of the wild card teams, it's by far like Vega and CDEC to me have. I'd say both teams. I'd rate them pretty equally. That if they get into the main event, they have that shot to finish like maybe not bottom four. Which to me is a big accomplishment for either team if they can finish. What would that be? 9th, 10th at that point, or sorry, 11th.
12.
Yeah,
12.
If they can,
I
finish
guess we'll talk about
the
wildcard teams a bit later.
Yeah, MVP Hot 6. Sorry, I derailed the conversation.
Yeah, no.
It was my fault.
Yeah, we're gonna do a whole podcast dedicated to the play-in teams, just because I feel that not a lot of people know them. But yeah,
Hot 6.
I mean, does anyone in this team stand out as maybe a surprising player, somebody to watch this international on this roster?
It's hard to say. Most of their experience is just against other Korean or C teams. Yeah. Like some of these guys will dismantle C teams or those other Korean teams, but I just can't see it translating to the TI.
Okay. I think the silence.
What is an advantage?
What is an advantage they played in the qualifier? I mean, I think they were all around. Both teams to me were pretty all around solid. I know in the past with MVP Phoenix, it was really the QO show. Like if they did well, it was just QO went off, and if they lost, Peep had a bad game. Like he would never really have a bad game, and they'd have an awesome overall team performance, but. I think with Hot 6, it's been pretty much a team effort. Jerax was the big addition to the team, I guess, where they brought him in pretty last minute and just in the nick of time to qualify.
Yeah.
I don't think that Hot 6 is really... they don't have like that one player that just carries the crap out of them. If you go back, like way back to when Korean Dota first started, MP was... I think he was in the first... I wanted to say GSL, but it's not GSL.
KDL.
Nexon's
the first Nexon league, and MP had an Invoker game where I'm like, my God, this guy is carrying really hard. This was Exhort Invoker. We don't see him anymore, sadly, or at least not very often. But all the players are on a pretty similar level. I feel they're just like a solid, well-rounded team to me, more than anything.
Okay.
How do the Koreans actually play on Southeast Asian servers? I thought that to like game in Korea, you have to have a Nexon account, and it's like a huge
schlep. For the qualifiers. They actually went down to Southeast Asia and played there, both teams.
Yeah, but I mean, for like regular
like a
time,
Malaysia team house for the qualifiers.
Where they live, I mean, so sure, okay. The big perk is they get to practice against the MVP Phoenix team, so they're like the only team who is on LAN playing against another team that's good, like 24/7. But at the same time, they live in a country with, like you said, there might be 50 million people who live in South Korea, but the penetration of Dota is so small that is like, a tiny, tiny talent pool to practice against. Like, even if you arranged, other than the people in MVP Phoenix and MVP Hot Six, the 5 best Korean players, and they played, they made a mix and they started just scrimming over and over. Like, do you think that that is like a pool where they can like develop and get out of?
No.
I don't think so. Not yet.
Not
I'm
currently.
not sure. Does anyone know if they're still in Malaysia or did they leave after the qualifiers?
I think they went back to Korea, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I think in the next year we may see the Southeast Asian scene really revitalized. There's, without directly spoiling anything, there's a lot of pretty big events in the works for the region, on the level or even surpassing major all-stars in terms of the prize pool, not in terms of how the event went, which was a bit of a train
There's
wreck
that one
in
that's
its own
been
right.
announced, right?
Has it been announced? There's which one?
There was one
the
that joined
Key TV
Dota.
one. The Key
Yeah,
TV
yeah.
one. Yeah, there's been Key TV. There's rumors of another pretty big event. Who knows? Maybe we even see a major in the region. If Valve, I mean, in theory, if Valve wants to be like as fair as possible across,
Then
the
Africa
region,
should get a region. Yay!
no. But I mean, what are the 4 big regions? You've got North America, you've got the Americas, you have Europe, you have Southeast Asia, and you have China. So, in theory, you've got Nexon in the region. Maybe Nexon. I don't think E Club gets it, given their track record and all the complaints I see about them. But maybe Nexon is given a major or is involved with one, and that could really develop the scene in the future. But as for this year going into TI, I mean, most of these players, they play on the China server. They don't even pub on the SEA server, at least not when they're trying their hardest. And apparently in Korea, they actually get pretty good ping to the China server compared to, like, say, what players from Malaysia or Singapore do. But still,
Oh, really?
The main thing is they don't, for matches, they're still mostly playing Southeast Asian teams, and I think that definitely does hurt their chances going into TI. Yeah, most of the Korean players just play on the China server when they're like seriously pubbing, at least from what I understand.
Yeah, the Korean servers are dead. Like, there's a website that tracks the like matchmaking, and it's just like 10 people looking for matchmaking compared to like 10,000 in CIS or something. Like, it's not a good showing.
It is a dead game there
Yeah.
in terms of the public player base, unfortunately. But
At the moment, there are 183 people queuing.
Oh, that's unusual.
Wow.
can you imagine the MMR gap?
Whoa.
In South Africa, there are 55 people queuing. My country is beating that country. Just kidding.
about that major that you're asking for.
Hey, at least no one would have any issues about visas. The only people who get rejected visas in South Africa are the Dalai Lama, and that's for political reasons.
Jeez.
Wow. All right, moving
That's
on. The final team we're going to cover in this podcast is the NA qualified team, which was Complexity.
Are we just skipping Navi? Are we not doing Navi?
Are we not? Yeah, let's do Navi. Never mind. Sorry. Europe, Navi. They're a pretty good team. No.
Okay, so they had a miracle run to get into TI, right? I don't know if you guys saw all the games, but they had a lot of games that if you play the game like 20 times, they probably win the game like at most 2 or 3 out of those 20 times. So as much as they have some accomplished players and they had some really awesome performances to get here, I also think they're very lucky to get to TI, and they barely scraped in. And along with that, I don't know. They have the veterans, right? They have players that have been there, done that in the biggest stage. But it feels like this team to me, as much as I want to believe that Navi can go top 4, top 8, they're going to need to have that magic a lot of games in a row. And having a magical run in a group stage where there's all best of 2 games, you have to be consistent. That's the big thing with this format. It really rewards consistent teams that, put up 2-0s, they win the games they're supposed to, they don't throw games, that they take care of business, right? I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the BO2 format, is it rewards those consistent teams. And I just feel Navi ultimately, despite qualifying for TI, is a very inconsistent team. They've had, going into the qualifiers, like, what results did they have? I don't recall anything.
It was a pretty fresh team going into the qualifiers.
Yeah.
It was a pretty new roster. To be fair.
And since then, what was the tournament they played against? They lost to VP, but they had a pretty good showing there.
Dream
Dream
League.
League.
Dream
They
League.
played
finals.
Dream League. That's true. They finished 2-3. They lost the BO5 2-3.
Yeah.
But that was it. That's just
they had
one.
they had a pretty good showing there. They beat VP earlier in the bracket, and they beat Alliance. They beat Ninjas in Pajamas, if that counts for much here.
I think the story behind Navi is like either they have a team worked out or they don't. And
Yeah,
although that's overall an inconsistency with them, like just because of how their inconsistency works, like I don't think they're the type of team that's going to drop a game against a team that they like played against and they've defeated in the past, and they quite they work them out. They know how the other team operates. They're going to beat them 2-0, and that type of skill is actually rewarded by the format. But at the same time, there's a lot of teams that are a brick wall for them. I don't think they're a team that we expect to ever take a game off EG or Secret or let's just say Empire. But we might see them take a game off beat IG 2-0. We might see them beat LGD 2-0. You know, if they think that they've worked out a team and they've got a specific strategy against the team, and they can execute. They are the kings of execution.
yeah. I think it'd be magical. It'd be tons of fun and magical to see them advance and do well in this, but a lot of things are going to have to go their way. There's going to have to be a lot of those magic moments, which would be pretty fun. But
You mean
yeah,
like
it's gonna be
Saniko
hard.
being a Winter Weaverman and Kravos being a Weaver?
I mean, does anybody remember that fight? Like the Weaver Winter Wyvern fight? Like I think it was the last
Yeah.
game where they ended up qualifying.
Yeah,
He got saved like
It was the
5,000
most
times. The guy's
ridiculous.
running around with 5 health for like literally a minute and a half, which is insane in a team fight. I don't see it happening consistently enough for them to make a run at TI, and that's against competition that's not as stiff as most of the teams at TI. So maybe I'm just a Navi hater. I mean, I've been accused of being a Navi fanboy in the past, so you can't be both, I guess. I hope they prove me wrong. This is like one of the teams where I feel the most strongly. I hope I'm wrong about them, but
yeah.
my feeling right now is that they just it's too many ifs and question marks, and they've got to get hot at the right time and play the right teams and not drop the games that they're supposed to win. And I just feel like they proved that they're very inconsistent in the qualifiers. So I don't know. That's where I sit on them
I
right
see
now.
them coming 9th through 12th. Is where I see them coming.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
I would-
not the bottom 4, but the 4 just below 8th.
Well, I mean, just given the history of Navi, you've got triple TI final appearances for 2 of their players, Art Style, a TI winner in his own right, along with Denny Nevos. Anything less than top 3, just based on the history, is a huge disappointment. But based on the roster and what we're expecting, if they were any other team, yeah, 9-12 would be like an okay showing, and anything above that would be a good showing for them, I would say.
I think the big thing that could drive this team for that magic run, though, is that chemistry. They finally have a team with that chemistry, and since forming, they, of course, qualified in that crazy bracket. And then a few weeks later, after being together a bit longer, they had that great showing at Dream League against VP, and now they have another month and a half together training. Finally, they've only been together for 2 months and a bit. They haven't been together long, and we haven't seen them for a month and a half.
They do seem like a little more comfortable with Art Style leading the team. I will say that.
Yeah.
As much shit as they've gotten for what happened with FNG, aha, you idiots, you kicked FNG and now look where he is and look where you are. It wasn't working for the team. Say what you will about maybe they were wrong about him, but they didn't trust him as a leader. That was clear. They even admitted as much. FNG said as much. Fact is, they didn't, for whatever reason. They do seem like they trust Art Style. They believe in him. They're willing to get behind his picks, his strategy, his calls. And that can make a big difference. I agree. I think they psychologically are seeming to gel a lot more than previous incarnations of the Navi roster, even if you could argue the skills gotten worse or FNG has a higher ceiling as a captain than Art Style does now. Art Style just seems like he's a better fit for this team for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so 2 things I wanted to just point out is
Yes.
both about Saniko. First of all, today in an interview on 2P, there was a Khavos quote saying that Saniko is the greatest player, or something that sounded like that when translated. So, I mean, first of all, that's going to be really awesome if you're Saniko. You're fitting into the new team into a position which is hard to fill in. you're working with art style, you're working with the established trio of Funnick and Dandy and Chavost, and things are going well. But then on the other hand, there was like a period of 2 weeks where Saniko wasn't even sure if he was going to TI, and there was visa complications for them and for a lot of the European teams and Chinese teams, and he only got confirmation a couple of days ago. How do you think that affected their preparation for the tournament? Do you think that they just carried on? They assumed that like Valve would set everything right and they just practiced, or do you think that was like a burning part of in the back of their mind?
I think that's all they could do is just go on and practice as they were. I don't think they really had any choices.
Yeah.
You can't at that point be like, oh, what if he doesn't come? Maybe we should train with this other guy. You can't even. That's like not an option for a team like this, I think.
It is a really big distraction, though. To me, the biggest example of this is Rave. Rave, heading into the TI qualifiers, they were hardly even practicing. They were constantly shuttling between the Philippines and Korea. 3 of their players are, of course, Filipino citizens, so they had to get their visas from that country. And you can't really play in the Philippines. Now, the good news in Navi's case is, sure, he had to get a visa, but it's not like he had to go to a country where the internet generally is pretty bad and you can't really practice and you're going to play worse. And they also knew they were going into the qualifiers anyway. So I don't know. I think it's definitely a factor. I think it's less of a factor for Navi than it undoubtedly was for Rave, for example. Where, I mean, you even had Jo. Like Jo had to spend half of his time managing the team / writing letters to their local senator in the Philippines to try and get him to support their visa applications and put some pressure on the government. Like it didn't sound like Navi their players had to deal with that quite as much. And I mean, Rave wasn't really the same. It's not the same kind of established organization that Navi is. Navi has a whole lot more infrastructure to support the players and people who can make it their full-time priority who aren't players to try and make that stuff happen. So yeah, I don't think it was as much of an issue for Navi as for a team like Rave, but it's still a distraction. It definitely doesn't help. I'm sure there were days where they would have scrimmed, but Saniko has to go to the visa office, and everyone just pubs for a day or takes a day off. It doesn't help your preparation, that's for sure. But I don't think it hurts them. It hurt them the same way that it did like the worst example of this to me, which would be Rave.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts on Navi? I think everybody kind of got it out.
Really fun team to watch.
Yeah.
Don't expect them to go higher than top 8, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's always fun to watch Dendi when he's on.
He's been really on lately. Like, there was a period up until a couple of months ago where Havost was the guy carrying this team so incredibly hard it was unbelievable. But at least in the qualifiers, Dendi was the one that just made... Dendi and Saniko, those were the 2 that made the biggest plays for this team, so...
I feel like
I
all
think
their players are fun to watch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They definitely are fun to watch.
I think this Met is also one which is like really, really good for Dendi, like in terms of from a viewer perspective and also from a player perspective. Like heroes like Queen of Pain, Puck, even Leshrak are like very fight-centric heroes. They're not the type of mid heroes which is, they're going to do a little bit of farming, go back to the jungle, farm some more, maybe come for a fight or two. They're like active, let's go kill things type of heroes. And like that's great for the spectator, and it also suits Dendi's playstyle. I think there were games where I watched of him playing, and like it reached the point where I was just like, I'm actually bored by this. This was like about 3 or 4 months ago. I'm bored by and it was like the first time that I ever thought that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in general the heroes that we're seeing right now do suit Dendi better. I don't know. I still feel like he gets a bad rap as like, oh, he can only play like the lane dominating. Some people say this. I'm not saying that you are. There are some people who say, oh, Dendi can only really play like the lane dominating snowballing heroes. Queen of Pain, Puck, probably 2 of the best examples of this. But I feel like he's proved everyone wrong. Leshrak now. I mean, Leshrak, the new cancer in everyone's pubs. Hopefully he gets banned every game at TI. God, I'm sick of that hero.
Dendi's 5-0 with him.
They've been giving Leshrak a lot to Havost, though, as well.
If he gets enough farm, I think it's a fine Havost hero, but you got to be a little careful early on. You can't just always run in. But yeah, I mean, like good example to me was like some of their most clutch wins were like they almost didn't even advance to the playoffs of the qualifiers. But then he had that one ridiculous Magnus game where he got so many RPs. I was casting with AC. It was a really fun game to cast and to watch. But I don't know. I feel like people underrate his ability to play those just like tempo controller heroes a lot. I do agree though. I haven't seen Dendy play too much of like the hard farming mids, like more of your classic Arteezy type heroes. Naga, when she used to go mid, really comes to mind as like an iconic example. Those I have never seen Dendy really play, and I don't think they suit him that well. But the good news is there's not that many of them out there right now that are seeing a lot of play. What's the biggest one? Like Shadow Fiend? Shadow Fiend's kind of a hybrid, and that's a hero that Dendy does play very well. So I agree. I think it's a great patch for Dendy.
Does do that. When Dendy does do that, though, he goes for like a lot of kills. He's a very, very active Shadow Fiend.
Yeah, he loves his Blink Dagger Rush.
Yeah, of the heroes that he's played so far this patch, Shadow Fiend has like got the third highest kills. It's Queen of Pain at the top, and then it's second to Storm Spirit, and then it's Leshrac and Shadow Fiend close up there in third and fourth.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So
that's
Na'Vi. It happened, and they're gonna happen at TI. So final team, Complexity. Did I miss anyone else? LD, Knoxville, Typhus.
No.
No, I got them all this time? Okay. Final team, Complexity Gaming. Ziz, Swindle Melons, Moon Meander, Z-Freak, and Fly. Won the NA qualifier. I think a lot of people were, I don't know, like half surprised. Didn't expect them to win it. A lot of people expecting Mouse Sports Tinker to take it. But they succeeded. They did it in really convincing fashion. I mean, I was pulling for Root and Mouse Sports, but I just couldn't help but like this team. They just played really well. I don't think they're going to do any better than most of the other qualified teams, except for eHome. But this might be their breakout. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Well, one thing to mention going into the qualifiers that they had like just formed the team before that.
Yeah.
Like the official team. So they had like no games that anyone else could look at. Or, from what I've heard, a lot of their scrims that they did were private, like no spectator lobbies. And yeah, I mean, coming into a tournament, if you can see what everyone else is doing and they can't see what you're doing, you're obviously at a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one thing, but they were so unexpected that I don't think any single person that I saw put them on their compendium. Like, not one.
No.
So, yeah, they were like the definition of a surprise. But if the other qualifiers were anything to look at, everything was a surprise. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they're a team of skilled players. Fly adds a new dimension and a lot of experience to the team. He might not be their drafter, like, 100%, but he's got a lot of skill and expertise to bring to the table when drafting is concerned. Very versatile players. A bunch of them have all played in like more than one role. And yeah, I don't think it's always going to be hard for America. I think maybe for the next couple of years to have more than one uber powerhouse that like we see in EG at the moment, and a couple of the C9 players Canadian.
One C9 player is Canadian.
Yeah. But like, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's only so many players who are going to get out there compared to like Europe, compared to China, where there's just a lot more players in general. So yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit upset that Not Today didn't win the qualifiers, but Complexity showed everyone that they deserved it.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of how they're gonna play in the groups.
Yeah.
They played really well in the qualifiers. The one team that was a huge disappointment in the American qualifiers was obviously Mouse Sports, who most people had as the favorites, but they didn't actually ever have to play them in the bracket. NAR took care of them, and they had the answers for NAR. They went 5-0 against them. Now, if I recall in the qualifiers, NAR had some issue. God, I forget what they were. They had like some weird internet issues. There was a really long delay in a couple of their games. I was casting a different region, so I didn't get to watch most of it. They
that was
they
just
have
in
looked
in the
It was only in the
That
finals.
was just against Mouse Sports. That was against Mouse Sports.
Okay, so it didn't
Wasn't
affect
it?
them against Call then. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was just
actually.
against Mouse. It was just against Mouse Sports, and their punishment was losing selection priority.
This is a team that has some very interesting personalities. I think Swindle and Moon really come to mind as for those who haven't seen it, there is a very infamous clip of Swindle when he was a much younger player in Heroes of New Earth. You could just look it up on YouTube. But and Moon has been known historically for his antics on stream, but they do seem like they've matured a lot, just judging by their behavior on social media, what I've heard from their manager. I will also say they had they had a really good support structure for their TI qualifiers. They had I don't know if you guys know Evany. She was the manager of Secret before Cyborg Matt took over. She cooked all their meals, really healthy food. I think they were even going to the gym together a decent amount with Fly, and I'm actually not sure about that second part. But in general, like they just had really good support for the qualifiers, and that goes a long way. That really does go a long way, especially for a lot of these teams who maybe just playing from their houses. They don't have a proper boot camp. I mean, certainly like Mouse Sports did, for example, but a lot of the other teams, the American qualifier, didn't. So they've had that good support, and I think that it's part of the reason why it's given them a leg up on the other American teams, as well as just more dedicated boot camp. They've had a real organization behind them in Complexity. That's very common in other scenes. It's very unusual in America. There's a lot of teams that they either have no organization or it's like hardly an organization. NAR, not an organization. Void Boys, not today. to provide some support. Yeah, Gerg. You've got Wheel. Leviathan has had some pretty good support as well as a team. Basically unknown. Team unknown. Not much. E-Hug, I have no idea. They used to do all those Reddit posts, and now they don't post on Reddit anymore, so I don't really know what's going on with them. I don't know. I think that helped them a bit in the America qualifiers. I look at BTS Americas, and I think a lot of people want to say, oh, these guys are shit. They couldn't even beat teams who didn't qualify for TI. Summer's Rift has changed their roster, they've looked pretty good with the new roster as well. With
Did they bring in Yawar, right?
Yeah, Yawar is a very talented individual player. And they also had a lot of internal issues with BSJ before, which I'm sure they'll have internal issues in the future. That's just the way of American Dota. But at least for now, they seem to be more of a well-oiled machine. So I also, if you're Complexity, it's primarily just practice for TI. It's just an online tournament. It's not a whole lot of money. You are 98% focused on TI, and these are just games to, basically keep your team in a good rhythm and maybe you experiment a bit. So I don't read too much into the fact that they had a slightly underwhelming showing there, and I still think they're bottom 4 in terms of what they've shown, but they have the potential maybe to finish like just 2 places up. I'd be very surprised if they do beyond that, but honestly, even that would be great for a team that, frankly, most of these players have not been to a TI or had any experience on the big stage. I think the only one who has is Fly. So,
yeah,
I would love to see them stick together and make a run towards the next major.
Yeah, could be interesting. So, any final predictions on Complexity?
LD
Bottom
words
4?
from my mouth.
Yeah, I mean,
gonna
he said it all.
I was gonna say bottom 2, and then like if they surprise, bottom 6, and like.
Well, bottom 6 is ambiguous, right? Because there's bottom 4 and then there's like 9 through 12.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't see them going far at all.
Yeah.
I think
even
they just
even them playing at their peak, like as good as we saw them in the NA quals, I don't think that's good enough to beat any of the invited teams.
Yeah. All right. So that kind of wraps it up for the team previews. Anybody got any thoughts on the international coming up? No.
It's going to be sweet. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm just really excited, man. I can't wait for it to start. I fly out to Seattle in 3 days, but then you still got to wait. I think it's another 3 days before the actual wild card even begins. Yeah. So I am just
I'm going to just be recovered
right
from.
now.
I'm just going to have recovered from jet lag, and then the wild cards are going to kick in. It's going to be incredible.
That's my secret weapon. Is I live on the West Coast, so I will have no jet lag.
Yeah, but you have to fly through flash floods you have to fly through flash floods and forest fires, bush fires.
Yeah, we like to fly over them rather than through them down here. I don't know how you
That's
guys do
generally
things
a
in South
good.
Africa.
It's generally a good rule.
Yeah, we have shark attacks like during surfing competitions here. That's the new thing.
Okay. So,
And on that note,
on that note, all right. So that has been Liquid Dota podcast number 6, the TI preview part 2. We will be trying to get a part 3 out with the play-in qualifiers. So all of these will be available before the international, so you get to listen to them. On that note, final shout-outs, Twitter plugs, anything exciting coming up. This is the chance to say it. So let's go around the room. Start with Knoxville.
I'm always okay. Shout out to Scant, as well as all the other TI talents and players. I will hopefully be alive, and I will talk to you all in a week. And it's going to be very exciting to be at the international in America. It's gonna be great. That's all.
Oh, definitely. Tefis, you're next.
I don't have too much. Just love to invite everyone to come to the wiki and contribute in any way you think you could. The one thing I will say is, for those who didn't know, we like to run a bracket contest, and the most recent one ended with Dota Pit, and actually Liquid Nazgul won the contest out of a couple hundred people.
rigged.
I know. I didn't have anything to do with it, though. Don't look at me.
Okay, and that will be happening for the international also?
It's tough. It's tough for us to set one up for when we don't have much time to look at brackets beforehand. We need to know the brackets a good few days beforehand, like exactly how they'll.
I mean, maybe
like
for
that.
TI, you guys can make an exception. You'll know the main event bracket.
Yeah.
You have like 2
Yeah.
You'll have all the brackets on the 25th or 24th.
Oh, then we'll
think.
probably see one. Like, as long as we know what the layout's going to be and how they're all seated immediately, we can probably get one out. Win some Windrunner bows and whatever else we can scrap up, maybe some shirts and stuff.
Sweet.
All right, and finally, LD, final shout-outs, plugs, Twitters, whatever else you got.
Oh, guys, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to come on. I love talking about these teams whenever I get a chance. So shout out to you, Rob, and John as well. And I think for me, there's not a whole lot else to say. I'm just really excited for TI. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out my fellow BTS folks. So shout out to Coddle Guy, Zyori, Gods, Merlini. Looking forward to heading up to Seattle with y'all. But yeah, it's gonna be an awesome event. Really excited to go. Hope you guys will all be there, and if you won't, that you get to watch as much of it as possible. But yeah, I'm just ready, man. I'm ready.
Yeah. And finally, I am Aegis. You can find me on Twitter at RobIsFunny. I'm trying to put out as many of these as I can, but life gets in the way. Yeah, shout out to Joel and Gaijin Dash. Dash does so much for this podcast that people don't even know. Shout out to everybody at Team Liquid. And yeah, join us next time. I still got to find outro music, but yeah, join us next time for Liquid Dota podcast number 7. This has been Liquid Dota podcast number 6. Thank you for enjoying.